Europe is a lie. I'm going to show you why your textbooks and your podcast bros are wrong. It's not the white continent. It's not the most advanced continent. And it's certainly not a continent. It just doesn't exist. It's a made-up term. Many things that people think are uniquely European are not from Europe. They came from other civilizations. Europe has just decided to adopt for itself. It's literally a part of Asia with less melanated people that just decided to call it, that's what we're doing now. But it doesn't even make sense because what is a European? What is Europe? So that's where we're going to get to etymology. My favorite thing in the world. Europa is a princess from the city of Tyre, and the earliest recorded case of the word Europe comes from her, from the Homeric hymn to Apollo. Okay? So it's written in 6th century BCE, and she's a Phoenician princess, which means an Arab. From the city of Tyre, Europa goes to Greece on a bull, and Zeus does what Zeus always does and has his way with her without her consent. So, at the end of the day, Europa is an Arab from the city of Tyre. She's a Levantine Arab, an Asiatic princess. Point one, the very notion of Europe is an Arab lady. Europe is the only continent named after a woman who is not European. You know, America is named after an Italian guy. White people pretty much named everything after themselves, but Europe. It's a fascinating concept. We're going to get to talking about the evolution of the word Europe, when it started to get used as a geographical term. The word barbarian comes from how the ancient Greeks used to mimic the white Europeans who lived up north, used to speak like bar. Oh my God, bro. Herodotus names Europa after the princess, using a geographical term to describe the northern barbarians. Okay? So this is what the Hellenic map of Herodotus looked like. Okay? So civilization is the Hellenic world. The northern barbarians live in Europa. The southern barbarians live in Libya. Eastern barbarians live in Asia. Greeks at the time. Europa is where uncivilized people lived. And the Hellenic world is where the civilized people lived. A Greek would see a Levantine Arab more similar to him or her than a Celt. That's simple. The second concept of Europe came from the Romans. And according to the Romans, Europe, or the civilized world, was the Mediterranean. It was Mare Nostrum. It's where, from North Africa to the southern banks of France and all that Mediterranean coast, that was the civilized world. That was where civilization was. That's where people knew how to read. That's when people knew how to be, interactive with each other. They all spoke Latin. Compare that to the Germanic barbarian who didn't know how to write or know the difference from his ass and his elbow, right? So in this time period, the civilized world exists in the Mediterranean. A Roman would have considered a Libyan, a Carthaginian, or a Berber, for that matter, more civilized and a part of the Roman civilization than a Germanic tribesman. Rome didn't use the word Europa per se. They only used it in their provincial maps for a region. They didn't necessarily have the continent of Europe. So the continent of Europe is dead. They don't consider Europe as a thing. They just consider Mediterranean civilized people, uncivilized northerners. That was the Roman concept of Europe. Fast forward to Charlemagne and the advent of the Catholic worldview. Charlemagne is a Frankish nobleman of Germanic descent. His kin, the Carolingians, convert to Christianity, and Charlemagne decides to carve himself out the modern notion of Europe. He is the father of modern Europe. There's no denying that. However, the way he did that is the controversial part. So Charlemagne is very Catholic. And the justification that he uses to conquer Europe is through the Pope. He uses the Catholic Church to create a kingdom for himself. And Europe is Catholic. So the Catholic world is Europe. Everyone else is uncivilized. So Spain, Portugal, southern Italy, and the Byzantine Empire, they're not civilized because they're not Catholics. And Charlemagne and the Catholic Church did the largest genocide on any white/European people, specifically the German Saxons, in world history. There are more crusades against white people than there are against any other people, including Muslims. The Catholic Church is single-handedly more responsible for the death of white people than any other organization. I just want to show that to people. All the trad bros, all the Euro bros out there, bring back traditionalism. What traditionalism are we talking about? What are we doing here? Are we talking about a Christian Europe or a pagan Europe? Because the last time I checked, yeah, that's what Charlemagne did. Well, what are we talking about, guys? Oh, are we talking about, what about the Teutonic Knights? Europe was predominantly pagan until 1200, 300 CE. So when people are talking about, let's bring back Europe to Christianity, what Christianity? I want you to name me one European value. Should we start with Christianity? Who is the inventor of Christianity? Jesus Christ. Born in Bethlehem. An olive-skinned man with curly hair, according to the Bible. So the God of Christianity is an Arab, and the continent of Europe is named after another Arab. Now, this is not some pro-Arab propaganda, third worldist argument I'm doing. Calm down with your comments. What I'm trying to portray here is the irony. I'm trying to highlight the irony here. When people think of the illegal migrants entering Europe, they imagine what brown people, Arab people, illegal migrants. Yeah, kind of like what Jesus would have looked like. Kind of like what Europa would have looked like. Migrants coming over to Europe. You know, the continent that's named after an Arab worships another Arab. Yeah, democracy is such a European thing, isn't it? EU is very democratic. Your countries are very democratic. Average tax rate in Europe is 25%. Women only gained the right to vote 50 years ago. You know, the democratic continent of Europe. It's super democratic and it's super liberal. Science and the Enlightenment. This is a European value, right? Let's talk about it. Scientific revolution and enlightenment. These are European realities, right? That's interesting because the very numerals that Europe uses comes from the Arabic Indio numeral system. Okay? The math as we know it today and used today was established by Arab and Muslim mathematicians. Latin numerals cannot be used to do math. So math as we know it was advanced by Asiatic peoples. Astronomy as we know it today was created by Persians. Hi, we're doing a quick edit. So the alphabet part got cut out. But the point is that the alphabet that Europe uses today originates from ancient Egypt. And cuneiform also originates from Sumeria and Mesopotamia. So the alphabet that Europe uses was also invented outside of Europe. So that's numerals and letters come from outside of Europe. Greek philosophy and texts that create the bedrock that European Enlightenment is built upon was translated and preserved by Muslim philosophers. The way the Greeks made mathematics and geometry, yeah, those numbers and all that knowledge was taught to them by the Middle Eastern peoples. All these guys got their educations in Babylon and Egypt. They talk about it. They praise those people. Pythagoras, who is the originator of Greek philosophy as we know it, was born, not too far away from Jesus Christ. Pythagoras' school of thought then gave way to Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Okay? So the inventor of the Greek schools of thought was a man from the Middle East. This is amazing. So the founder of the European religion, the so-called European religion, is from the Middle East. The founding philosopher of the European philosophies is from the Middle East. The very name Europa is from the Middle East. History is cyclical. Europe is a story of wars and mass migrations. If we are to go back to, let's say, 100 CE, Rome existed as an empire. What was Rome's biggest problem? The white barbarians coming over the borders. One of the biggest reasons why Rome was destroyed was because white barbarians were at the gates. They were at the gates. They were military-aged men coming with their tribes illegally, breaking down borders, bringing in their culture, and destroying the brown olive-skinned peoples who created the Roman civilization. So, for a Roman man, the white barbarian was the illegal immigrant, the alien, the criminal. They didn't believe in God. They were not Christian. They came in pillaging, raping. These were vandals, literally vandals. Do you guys know where the word vandal comes from? It's a German tribe that went from modern-day Germany to France, to Spain, then to North Africa. From North Africa, they invaded Rome. The Roman Empire had emperors from North Africa and Syria, Libya, and other North African countries, and even the Levant and Egypt were core parts of the Roman Empire as opposed to Northern Europe. So when we say, let's go back to traditional Europe, which Europe are we talking about? Are we talking about Roman Europe, which would make, Northern Europeans barbarians? Are we talking about the Carolingian Europe, which would make, half of Europe pagan or Muslim? Or are we talking about Renaissance Europe, which would make Europe either Catholic or Protestant or Orthodox? They were all killing each other, by the way. So which tradition are we going back to, buddy boy? Which tradition are we talking about? Because Rome had a North African emperor before other European countries. Let's go back to tradition. Let's make Rome great again. Let's bring olive-skinned brown people back into power, and let's kick the white barbarians out. Now, that's not the argument I'm making. I'm not some crazy left woke person that wants to portray Achilles as a black person. No, I'm against that also. But I'm for proper understanding of history and perennial knowledge. Okay? There's no such thing as a Europe that's separate from the Middle East. You might want to portray Middle Eastern peoples as foreigners and aliens. Well, I've got news for you. Europe doesn't exist without them. And the same way, Middle East doesn't exist without Europe. We're in a symbiotic relationship, whether you like it or not. Okay? North Africa used to be white. It became brown, white, brown again. Europe was brown. It became white. It's not a skin issue. Okay? Okay? Europe was Christian. Now it's not. I mean, what type of Christian are we talking about? It doesn't end. The arguments don't end. So the reason why I'm making these arguments is because there's a group of technocrats that are pushing certain agendas. So Elon Musk's and Peter Thiel's of the world are causing division within the European peoples in a vain attempt to divide and conquer. They're supplying and supporting new government regimes and political parties so they can have governments that they can control and impose their own legislation upon us. Don't fall into this agenda. It's tempting, I understand. When you look at information, white people are not having children. It's the brown people who are having kids. Or racism, right? Where does that come from? Survival of the fittest? Well, if white people are such a superior race, why aren't they having kids? Why is the white female so brain rotten with garbage? If it was such a superior race, why are they letting the Jews control them? I mean, the arguments don't end. So this is what I'm trying to say. Forget about this, the white people better, brown people bad argument. This is not history. This is not a reality. Don't let these technocrats feed you bullshit information so you become radicalized. Or during the time of the Second World War, the SS and Himmler were doing digs to find old Germanic ruins. And when Hitler hears of this, he immediately orders Himmler to stop doing the digs because it's exposing how underdeveloped the Germanic peoples were as opposed to, let's say, the Italians or the southern Mediterranean world or the Arabs. Hitler agreed with this opinion. So let's chill with the racist bullshit. We should really love our neighbor because that's what Jesus or Yeshua or Isa bin Maryam would have wanted you to think. You either adopt your brain to cyclical patterns and understand why we're going through what we're going through, or you should get a lobotomy. Because we've been mixed since the beginning of time. Thank you.